So going into Joker's Wild, Bungie had to answer one main question. How do you structure an entire DLC after a very polarizing game mode that people are either really going to enjoy or they're going to hate at the beginning? So we go into Joker's Wild and they say we have this idea. We're going to make Gambit Prime, right? We're going to put the word Prime after the word Gambit and pretend this is some new shit. It's like the YouTube auditor using his old dildo, pretending it's new and continuing to go fuck himself, man. So Bungie created this whole concept that we're going to learn all about the Drifter. We're going to see all the background, all the lore, and we're going to get all these stories sent over to the Postmaster explaining why we should or shouldn't trust Drifter, whatever the hell it is. In the meantime, we're going to play this one game mode, Gambit Prime, and then we're going to add a second game mode called Reckoning. Reckoning is basically a horde mode where at the end of it, you're going to get a whole bunch of tokens and shit like that. The gameplay loop, though, is literally go play Gambit Prime, go play Reckoning, go play Gambit Prime, go play Reckoning, go play Gambit Prime, and go play Reckoning. You get the idea, right? Obviously, with these Season Pass DLCs, Bungie said from the very beginning, it's going to be light on story. It's going to be relatively light on content. It's going to have a couple things. It's going to increase your light level. But essentially, you're going to get a couple of new activities. And then basically, they're going to run all the old shit all over again. So when this DLC launched, we kind of knew, all right, it's going to be structured around Gambit. They're going to say Gambit is going to evolve. Let's see what the changes are. Gambit Prime is basically regular Gambit with more fucking problems. If you liked Gambit before, you might like Gambit Prime now. If you didn't like Gambit before, I can't imagine that Gambit Prime is really going to change your idea as to how the game mode is supposed to play. As with any game mode in the game, if you have teammates that know how to play, you're going to have an easier time. If you don't have teammates that don't know how to play and you're playing with a whole bunch of solos, yeah, you're going to get your ass kicked. The game mode itself does have some fixes that players have been asking for a little while now when it comes to Gambit. Essentially, they wanted a shorter Gambit match. So instead of having 3 rounds in regular Gambit, now you have basically one main round and you got to melt down a boss. Another change that players wanted was bosses in Gambit regular were pretty easy to melt down. Once you got to the envoys, or even then you could burn right through the envoys, all you had to do was melt the boss before your invader could come over. In this one, you can't melt the boss immediately. You can get through at least 2/3 of its health, and then afterwards, you'll be able to melt the boss. For the most part, other teams have already developed the strategies as to how you beat Gambit Prime. Not a big deal. Basically, you try to get through as many envoys as you can, build up your stacks, try to kill invaders, and then once you've killed enough envoys, right after you kill an invader, you melt the boss. No big deal. People have already figured this out. Basically, you want to get to 100 motes as quickly as you can. Another big difference happened with some of the motes, where if you put in enough blockers, they could actually start taking away from the other team. You have the same invader mechanics. You go over, you try and blow people up. It's sort of the same shit. Now, one of the big differences, and I really actually like with this DLC, is the armor sets. The armor sets say that, oh, you're supposed to play a certain role. Now, some players basically have to go out and get some armor sets, and essentially these pieces of armor are going to improve what you normally like to do. For people that are invaders, they're going to have this invader set of armor that makes them a pretty damn good invader. For people that are mote collectors, where basically all they do is they run around, they collect motes, and they bank those ships up, you're going to have armor sets that help you with that kind of shit. They have things for people that just want to kill the AI, other things for people that are sort of like defenders, where, oh, I'm going to kill the invader as soon as it comes over. So essentially, they've kind of increased the roles that people already like to play. That's cool. I like it. I think that's a pretty good idea to have people have some specialized gear for Gambit Prime. Now, as far as Gambit Regular, it's kind of been left behind, which, to be honest, it's not really a bad thing. Gambit was really just sort of a test-out mode between PvEVP. So for them to say, you know what, yeah, regular Gambit, we're just going to leave it how it is. We're not really going to improve. We're going to go ahead and just focus on Gambit Prime. I don't have too much of a problem with it, but essentially some of the gear that you're getting right now means that all you're really going to play is Gambit Prime. Now, how do you get the gear? Bungie came up with this brilliant idea, where as opposed to just playing a little bit of content, sort of like we had with the Forges in the prior DLC, where once you beat the content, you're pretty much running the same shit since last DLC, unless you play the Scourge of the Past raid. Now we're going to add this game mode, Reckoning. Reckoning is basically waves of enemies that we've all seen in types of prior games. Basically, you have to get through as many enemies as possible. Once you get to the end, kill a boss, and you win the round. That's Tier 1. Tier 2, same shit, get through all the enemies. Then you're going to have a little bit of mechanics to get across a bridge, and then at the end, you're going to face a higher level boss. Cool. In return for winning these games in Reckoning, you're going to wager these tokens. And these tokens at the end are going to give you those Gambit Prime pieces of gear. So if I wager a token for an Invader, I get Invader gear. I get my gear out of Reckoning, I go to play Gambit Prime, and I can do some more invading. This circular loop of gameplay logic is a pretty clever way from Bungie to get people to keep playing. For those who want to collect a better set of gear, for those who want to have those random rolls that absolutely work with all the gear that they have, you're going to have to go through this loop. Play Gambit Prime, do some of the bounties, get one of those, whatever the hell they are, those wager tokens, whatever the fuck they want to call these shits. Take those tokens, go to Reckoning, play Reckoning, and hopefully you get the drop that you want. If you get the drop that you want, you go back and you play some Gambit Prime and you beat all the bounties and shit like that. So essentially, it's a non-stop loop that players will be able to do if they want to get better gear. The challenge for people that don't like Gambit is that you're not really going to get the gear. Sure, you can play Reckoning. You can play waves of modes and shit like that if you want to, but the reality is you can find that in almost every other place in the game. You have the Blind Well, you have Escalation Protocol, so there are plenty of places in which you can actually do this beforehand without having to play Reckoning. So for those who don't buy the DLC, it's not like you need to buy this DLC. You don't have to have the annual pass, but essentially because you have this with the annual pass, you can't buy Joker's Wild alone, or you can't ignore Joker's Wild. Essentially, they're all stuck together. If you played the Season of the Forge, you already have access to Joker's Wild. If you didn't buy Season of the Forge, you can't just go out and buy Joker's Wild in order to play it. But essentially, for those who continue to play the game, you have a little bit of something if you want to play Gambit. Now, me personally, I've never been a fan of Gambit. I thought it was fun at first, but the more you play it, the more you realize it plays the same exact way. And I have the same feelings for Gambit Prime. Once you figure out how to do things, you already know how the games are going to play every single time, especially if you play with a party. You've already learned the strategies as to when to put the blockers in. You don't put blockers in first, you wait till second. You don't put just one blocker in, you put all your blockers in at one time. Your Invader that you send over should have heavy ammo. If they have heavy ammo, send them over. If they don't have heavy ammo, hopefully your random doesn't take it and run over there. The fucking randoms in this goddamn game. When it's time to burn the boss, obviously, you don't do it right away. You kill your envoys, you wait for the invaders. Once you kill your invaders, then you start burning your envoy. Essentially, it's pretty much the same cycle that you're going to play in Gambit Prime. Now, over the course of, I guess, a couple weeks, it's going to get rolled out to all the different maps. Right now, there's just one map, but I guess they're going to start opening up some of the other maps. But for the reality is, it's going to play exactly the same every single time. Basically, you're just going to kill enemies, collect your motes, then get to the envoys, wait for the invaders, burn the boss. That's really it. The unfortunate thing about all these DLCs is that you're still doing some of the content that we have from the past in order to rank up. I'm still having to go to the Dreaming City. I'm still doing my 3 strikes. I'm still doing my Nightfalls. I'm still having to play the Crucible. Thank fuck it was Mayhem this week. Oh man, I swear to God, if it wasn't Mayhem, I would have been pissed off, because Mayhem is the only mode that I actually like playing in the Crucible, regardless of whether you get fucked up or not. Ranking up this season is not really a necessity. Essentially, if you want to get into Tier 2 and Tier 3 of Reckoning, that's probably the only thing that you're going to need, because that seems like the end game activity that's power related to your level. But essentially, if you don't want to rank up right away, if you're not racing to get to the end, you really don't have to this particular season. Without a raid, there essentially wasn't something that you absolutely needed to have the highest light level from the beginning. With Reckoning, because it's a match-made activity, and it's a continuous match-made activity, that was a pretty good idea that Bungie came up with, so that people can just jump in, they don't have to worry about a fire team, you automatically get into matches, and they're going to be people that are matched up with you. That was a good idea on their part. Not like a raid, where you absolutely need to have 5 other people in order to play it. But overall, is Joker's Wild going to get people to return to the game? Probably not. Is it going to turn people off that you have to pay for the annual pass in order to get access to this? Absolutely. For those who have not stuck around since Season of the Forge, they're not going to stick around for Joker's Wild. Once you get to power level 700, that's pretty much it. For those who like Gambit, they'll continue to play Gambit Prime. There are going to be people who, like me, who go after all the exotics, maybe do the event or whatever the case is that they're going to have, the seasonal event that we're talking about. But otherwise, this is just an average DLC. When other games come out, people are going to flock to that once they've gotten their fill of Gambit, or once they've gotten to power level 700 in this motherfucker. But in the meantime, for those who do want to get into games, by all means, you can find me online most of the time trying to go between Gambit Prime and Reckoning if I'm not doing some of the other power leveling shit during the week. So feel free to join me at those times. As always, rate, comment, subscribe, and other good shit. And I'll see you guys in the next video.